Hello, my name is Paige Castellanos, and I'm an assistant research professor at Penn State, as well as the program manager for our Gender Equity through Agricultural Research and Education initiative. I'm really happy to be part of this panel and to be able to share about our project, which focuses on women's empowerment and time poverty in the northern region of Ghana. And happy to share on behalf of our collaborators and team that is listed here. As I mentioned, we're working in Ghana in Western Africa, one of the Feed the Future countries, and we're working in the northern region of the country outside of the area of Tamale. Our project, as is the other projects in this panel, it's funded through USAID's Feed the Future initiative and the Peanut Innovation Lab, which is located at the University of Georgia. And our team is made up of researchers and scholars from the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute located in Ghana and Penn State. We come together to focus on time poverty and time savings, particularly among smallholder peanut producers in the northern part of the country. We have four main project objectives. The first, to measure and understand time poverty and time use between men and women and those gender differences. Second, we are inventorying time saving and time enhancing technologies. And we're doing this through focus groups and also a gender integrated farmer field school. Thirdly, we're measuring whether these interventions actually enhance women's capacity to participate in the peanut value chain and thereby household well-being. And lastly, we are providing opportunity for capacity development at the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute. Just to give an overview of time poverty, it's broadly defined as not having enough time to perform tasks needed to survive or in order to improve family well-being. Colleagues at IFPRI have found that time use is highly gendered, and that's largely because of women's increased burden with unequal demands of care work and unpaid labor. For both women and men, there are seasonal differences in domestic labor, and throughout our research design in this study, we dig a little bit deeper into those differences. So peanut production and peanuts is largely considered a woman's crop, particularly in this part of the world. However, there are differences in participation in production and decision-making, which I'm going to describe a little bit later as part of our baseline data collection. Also, I just want to flag that peanut production is really labor intensive. And so time constraints serve as one of the largest barriers to both production and also selling and marketing of peanuts. So our study incorporates the abbreviated WEA, the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, and also expands it to a larger survey that includes questions related to peanut production and different aspects of peanut production. It includes household demographics as well as other household questions, and also even some questions related to COVID and the impact that COVID is having on these areas. We have done now 3 waves over different growing seasons. Initially, we did this remote by telephone because of the pandemic and not being able to travel. We have 2 different communities where we're working, and in each of the households, we are interviewing multiple members of the households. In some cases, the man and the woman, and other cases, when they're polygamous households, we are interviewing multiple wives within the same household. So as I mentioned, just a reminder, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the WEA, but we're using the abbreviated version. And this includes 5 domains of empowerment. That includes indicators related to production and agricultural production. It includes indicators related to the ownership and access to resources, also control and use over income, as well as indicators related to the membership in different groups in the communities, whether they're economic or social groups. And lastly, the one that we're kind of focusing on is the allocation of time for both productive and domestic tasks. In order to think about time poverty, there are different approaches in terms of defining the threshold and how sensitive the approach might be to defining time poverty. Some of these are more relative in terms of the type of time poverty they're identifying. And the third approach, which is the one that's adopted by the WEA, is an absolute cutoff of being committed of over 10.5 hours. And so we'll share the results for these different approaches and how they compare. Just to give a little bit of background about our demographics, we had 172 respondents over 68 different households. The median age for men is around 48 years old, whereas women, it's a little bit younger, around 38 years old. Men reported a little bit over 3 acres of peanut production, whereas women are reporting to about 2.25 acres. And as I mentioned, in many cases, we interviewed multiple wives within a household. And so about 40%, there was only one wife listed in the household. 26% were self-reported as the first wife. 29% or so were self-reported as the second wife, and quite a bit fewer, only 6% were listed as the third wife within the household. So to give a little bit of indication of the types of results we're looking at, here is an indicator related to the participation in peanut production. And for all of the questions, we are showing both what men and women say. So the women's responses are represented by the blue bars, and what the men are saying is represented by the gray bars. And so when asking who's responsible for field preparation, there's not very much disagreement in terms of responses. So both men and women are saying that men with children are largely responsible for field preparation. In terms of who's responsible for weeding, similarly, there's quite a bit of agreement, where maybe a slight difference is that some women are reporting that women or women and children are responsible for weeding. Men really aren't indicating that at all. Both the largest percentage of men and women are saying that men are responsible for the weeding and maintenance of the peanut production. In terms of who's responsible for harvesting, there are significant differences in reporting, where women are responding that there's a certain number of women who are solely responsible for harvesting. Also, women are responding that they are doing this work jointly with men and children. Whereas a large percentage, almost 20% of men, are saying that they're solely responsible for harvesting, whereas there are 0% of women who believe this to be true. In terms of responsible for selling, who's responsible for selling, again, there are significant differences, where women are more than 40% of women say that they're solely responsible for the selling of peanut productions, although a lower percentage of men are recognizing women's work in this area. And then if we switch gears and look a little bit at decision-making around peanut production, if we think about we asked about who makes decisions on the amount to grow, there were significant differences. There is a percentage of women who say that they're responsible for making decisions about the amount to grow, where there are 0 men who are recognizing women's contributions there. A larger percentage of both men and women, although more men, are saying that men are responsible for making decisions about the amount to grow. In terms of who owns and manages the peanuts, there is a percentage of women who are saying they are owning and managing the peanuts, although 0 men are reporting that. A larger amount of both men and women, but a much more percentage, a much higher percentage of men are saying that they own and manage the peanuts solely. In terms of who's making decisions about selling the peanuts, again, you see similar patterns in the differences, where women do respond that they are responsible for decisions about selling peanuts, and men are indicating a higher percentage are as being responsible for making decisions about selling peanuts on their own. And who is making the decisions about what to do with the income once the peanuts are sold? Again, significant differences in terms of reporting. Women are saying that there are some women who are able to make decisions about the income from sales, although men are not recognizing those capacities. And again, more women and quite a higher amount of men are saying that they're solely responsible for making decisions about the income from the sales of peanuts. So now if we look at reporting from time use, and this is over a 24-hour recall as indicated by the WEA, you can see the men's responses in terms of time use is represented here by the dotted line, and the women's is the solid line. There are some gender differences in participation in agriculture. I would note women's participation is fairly high, 3 hours or a little bit over 3 hours a day on average, although men are reporting almost 7 hours a day in this area. And then if we look at care work, which includes cooking, domestic work, taking care of children, and also elderly, the roles flip, and men are not reporting very much time at all, if any, and women are largely responsible in spending quite a few hours daily in these care work responsibilities. And then lastly, these differences here also in terms of leisure time, or what we would consider leisure time, social activities, exercising, religious activities, men are reporting much more time than women. And as you can see, for men, it's almost as much time spent in these activities as women are spending in terms of care work. So then if we return to the time poverty approaches, you can see particularly narrowing in on this absolute threshold of 10.5 hours, women are much more likely to experience time poverty. And actually across all of the thresholds, depending on how sensitive they are, in all cases, women are more likely to be reporting time poverty. So what are the main takeaways from all of this analysis? One thing, maybe not surprising, but what maybe is a little bit surprising is how stark the differences are, is that men are really unaware, or at least unrecognizing, of women's contributions, particularly in peanut production. Also, despite the idea and acceptance that peanuts are a women's crop, men are really maintaining control. Both men and women are reporting that men are the ones who are making decisions about production, selling, and using the income. Also in this area, men are not recognizing those women who do feel they have that ability to make those decisions. Men are not recognizing their ability. Also of note, there are high rates of time poverty, but this is much higher among women for all of the different approaches, but particularly for the absolute threshold of 10.5 hours. And lastly, just to note that there are other challenges in production and market access. One thing about the Peanut Innovation Lab is that they look at peanut production and research in this area holistically, not just the technical research related aspects, but also taking into consideration socioeconomic dimensions, and in particular gender differences and gender norms as part of the importance of understanding and improving peanut production. So for our next steps, kind of quickly, some of these are not actually next steps, they're happening concurrently. But as I mentioned, we have conducted these data points and data collection at different growing seasons, and so we will have additional analysis. Also, we are implementing a gender integrated farmer field school. This is an opportunity for us to take these findings and understanding of kind of the gender differences, both in participation and decision making, but also recognizing those contributions. So we're able to incorporate those into a curricula for the communities, and not just address technical aspects or technical trainings, but also incorporate issues of household relationships and responsibilities, and looking at those gender differences. And we're also complementing the survey data collection with in-depth interviews to really uncover and underline the gender differences. And lastly, I would just point to some of these advances will be shared at a webinar that the Peanut Innovation Lab is sponsoring, which will be held on October 28th. We'd be happy to share those, share the information about how to connect, and hopefully a lot of you may be able to join us for that. So again, thank you very much for your time and for including us. Appreciation for the Peanut Innovation Lab and funding from USAID in support of our work. Hopefully my colleagues are able to join this panel. I apologize for not being able to connect, at least virtually in person, but hopefully we're able to address any questions, and please feel free to reach out in case there are any comments. And I wish you the best of luck in the rest of your conference.